of Rumi's view of painting itself. Rumi tells the story of a certain king who heard that the greatest painters in the world were the Chinese and the people of Rum. Rum meaning Rome, that is Asia Minor, the former Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire, which the Muslims had conquered in the 11th century, where they set up the great Seljuk Sultanate, which they continued to call Rum. And when many refugees came from Central Asia and Iran, fleeing before the Mongol invasions of the 13th century, they sought haven in the capital city of Rum, the capital city being Konya, and the poet who was born in what is now Afghanistan, Jalaluddin, when he settled finally in Rum, became known as Rumi and eventually became the very patron saint of the Sultanate of Rum, which in turn gave birth to what is now modern Turkey. Now, Rumi, in what is now Turkey, was very sensitive to the great art of the Byzantines, and these were the people that he called the Rumis. And according to the story he tells, the king ordered that there should be a contest to show which were the greatest painters, the Chinese or the Byzantines, or the Greeks, the Rumis. Now, he ordered a great hall to be set up, and in this hall, he ordered that the Greeks should paint on their side of the wall, and the Chinese should paint on their side. And he ordered a great curtain to be placed so that the Greeks and the Chinese couldn't see what their rivals were painting. Now, strangely enough, according to the way Rumi says the story, the Chinese very, very carefully painted wonderful images on their side of the wall, but the Greeks on their side did nothing but polish and polish and polish their side of the wall. And when the king finally ordered the curtain to be raised, he was astonished. And here you can see him biting his finger in astonishment because he could see no difference between what the Chinese had painted on their side of the wall and what the Greeks had painted on their side. Now, here, this is an early 16th century Persian painter whose work somehow made it to the treasury of the Turkish sultans in Istanbul, where it's preserved to this day. And the painter tried to express this story by showing how both the Chinese on their side and the Greeks on their side had tried to depict the entire cosmos. What the Chinese painted here, according to this artist's interpretation, is the tree of life, with its endless ramifications, and every leaf of this magic tree is another of God's creatures, because this entire universe can be compared to a single tree, and every branch, every twig, every leaf of this tree is one manifestation of a single divine reality. However, this is what the Chinese painted on the right. The Greeks on the left polished and polished and polished so that their wall shone like a mirror. And this perfect mirror exactly reflected what the Chinese had painted, but reflected it in even brighter colors, with even sharper definition. Amusing fairy tale, perhaps, and we can trace back its origins. We know that Rumi got the story from a poet who had lived some 2 generations previously, Nizami, who had reversed the order. It was the Chinese who had polished and the Greeks who had painted. And Nizami himself got the story from still an earlier Islamic philosopher, Al-Ghazali, who lived in the early 12th century. And probably the origin of this famous story goes back to the practice of ancient India and Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, where to this day we can see the 6th century frescoes of the great rock of Sigiriya, reflected still in polished wall surfaces just across from the frescoes, you can still make out, after 1,500 years, the colors in reflection. And this sort of practice became famous, and the Islamic world perpetuated the story. But the meaning of the story for Rumi is this. The Chinese, on the right here, represent philosophers. Philosophers who can understand the secrets of the universe by rational discourse, by logical induction, until finally, through sheer dint of study and learning, they come to encompass the entire universal order in their understanding. But this is an intellectual process. The mystics, on the other hand, understand all this through sheer intuition. This is because they have polished their awareness, or as Sufis call it, their hearts, to a mirror-bright polish, so that their mystical awareness, like a perfect mirror on the surface of their hearts, reflects the entire order of the universe. This means that the mystics and the philosophers are equals. They are equivalent, but each have their own way of approaching reality. And what Rumi is alluding to is a famous conversation between the most celebrated and eminent of all Muslim philosophers of the Middle Ages, Avicenna, Ibn Sina in Arabic and Persian, Avicenna in the 11th century, who was discussing the nature of the universe with a famous mystic of the time, Abu Sa'id ibn Abil Khair. And Abu Sa'id, the mystic, in compliment to the philosopher Avicenna, said, "What I see, he knows." But the philosopher answered, "Yes, but what I know, he sees." And seeing in this visionary grasp is what Rumi's poetry invites us to do.